Right, well, once again, welcome to the online citizenship class. And actually, this part of the N400 is probably one of the most important parts. So let's go ahead and before we talk about these sections, we need to discuss specifically some vocabulary, okay? So in this week's class, we're going to be talking about a part of the application that can be confusing to students. And that part is part 9. And that's the part where we talk about your trips outside of the United States. Now, some of you have already told me, Mr. John, I have not traveled outside of the United States. Yes, but remember, when it comes time for your interview, maybe by that point you will have traveled to your country or to other places. So again, I want to take a few minutes and talk about this part of the test, of the interview, because again, it can be confusing. Now, first off, guys, we're going to talk about the difference between two important ideas. Okay, now everybody turn on your microphones. Okay, so is everybody ready? So we're going to say these two things together. So guys, repeat after me. Continuous residence.
Continuous residence.
Okay, now say the second one. Physical presence.
Physical presence.
Okay, thank you. All right, now you can turn the mics off just for a moment. All right, so the question is, Mr. John, what do those words mean? Okay, and how does that affect my traveling outside of the United States? Okay, well, first off, let's talk about continuous residence. Now, if you remember in part 5, remember we talked about part 5 was asking about your residence in the United States. Now remember, residence means where you live, your address, okay? Now, if you remember, we said you must have residence in the United States for 5 years as a permanent resident. Remember, that means green card holder, or 3 years if you're married to an American citizen. So everyone remember that? That's a big part of the application, right? 5 or 3. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what that means is, that means you must reside in the United States with a U.S. address. So you must reside. That means you must have a United States address continuously for 5 years. Now, continuously means going on and on and on and on. But this means that you cannot reside outside of the United States for more than 6 months during that time. So, for example, if maybe your mother or father maybe are sick and you go back to your country. Now, if you stay with your mother and father for 3 months, that's okay. And that means you still have continuous residence in the United States, okay? Now, if you go for 6 months and you live with your family, maybe you even change your address to that country. Maybe you think, you're paying taxes or something in that country. Well, that could be a problem. Continuous residence means that you have an address and are living at the address for 5 years or 3 years. And notice what it says, and not outside of the country for more than 6 months during that time. So again, continuous does not mean that you have to be at your house and in your house all the time for 5 years. So continuous residence means that you have an American address for 5 years. If you go outside of the country for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, that's okay. You still have continuous residence, okay? The problem begins at 6 months and maybe longer. So that's something to remember, okay? So hopefully everyone in the group has had continuous residence. So if you have to leave the country, again, that's okay. But for some reason, that 6 months, right, that 6 months number is important, okay? Now, look what it says. Okay, follow me carefully. If you resided outside of the country, so if you moved back to your country for address, for any other purpose, right? If you changed your address for more than 6 months, you may have to wait another 5 years before you can apply again. Okay, do we understand me? So continuous residence means that you cannot interrupt, you cannot stop residing in the United States for more than 6 months. Now, sometimes I have students whose families are sick. Maybe they have to go back home and help their family. And if they're gone for 2 months, for 3 months, that's okay. But in the United States, and to apply for citizenship, you have to have 5 continuous years of residence. And if you leave the country for more than 6 months, you might have to start the process again. Okay? All right. Does everyone understand this? You can use the chat box. You can use the microphone.
Yeah, yes, we understand.
Okay, good.
But Mr. John, what
Saba.
happened with the COVID? Because I know some people, they go back to their home country and they stuck over there and they can't come back.
Well, now keep in mind, we're only talking about the basics here, the general description. Again, this will be a situation where they will have to talk to USCIS because USCIS does have some COVID exceptions. Now, Saba, usually the problem is if when people travel outside of the United States, especially if you're a permanent resident holder, if you know that you're going to be gone for more than 6 months, you can apply for re-entry into the United States. In fact, you probably, you probably will apply for that, if you know you're going to be gone for a long time. So keep in mind, Saba, there are some, some possibilities. So again, COVID is probably going to make some changes in that. But also you can apply for re-entry into the United States. And then it might change the situation. Now remember, I said you may have to start the process over. Some people, of course, might have exceptions. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. So again, I'm not the expert in many of those types of situations, Saba. So again, I can only speak to those what they tell us in terms of just the general application. Okay. But yeah, COVID has probably made some of these things more difficult. And notice, Saba, it does not mean that you can never apply again. It just means you may have to wait to apply
Yes.
again. Yeah.
But
Okay.
John,
Yes, ma'am.
I want to say something.
Okay.
But I remember the interview the first time for the green card, and then the officer told me that don't count 6 months because the months are sometimes 31 day.
Right.
Sometimes 20. So he said we must count 180 days.
Yeah, so they often recommend using days instead of months.
Yeah.
Now, what's funny, Elaine, is you go on to the USCIS website, you look at the information about the application for reentry and so on, and they don't mention those days anywhere. Yeah, so
officer told me that must remember to count 160 days.
yeah, so basically half of the year, yeah, more or less half of the year. So that's a good thing to remember. And usually, if you're going to be gone 6 months, you're going to have to reapply for entry.
Yeah.
Apply for reentry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Thank you, Elaine. Okay, all right. Now let's go ahead and talk about the second idea. So remember, the second idea is called physical presence. Okay, so let's look at that one. Now, physical presence, I think this is probably what you're also talking about, Elaine, means that you are physically in the United States. Your body, right, your face, your body, everything is in the United States for a total, okay, so let's look at it carefully, for a total of at least 30 months. Now, 30 months is about 2 years and 6 months out of those 5 years. and you cannot be outside of the United States for more than 1 year during those 5 years. So again, physical presence means that you must be physically in the United States for a total of 2 years and 6 months. So if you think about it, yes, sometimes I have students who go back to their country every year, and sometimes they go back for 1 year, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and that's fine, right? Again, the problem is when you start getting to 6 months outside of the United States. And then, of course, if you're gone outside of the United States for 1 year, that could be a problem. You might lose the opportunity to reapply for permanent resident status. So keep in mind that can be a problem in terms of physical presence. So if you're gone physically outside of the United States for more than 1 year at a time, it's very difficult to reapply for permanent resident status. Now, in my experience, this has not happened in any of the students we've had in the citizenship program before. But again, sometimes students may have difficulty coming back from their countries for many reasons, okay? So again, that physical presence means your body, you are here in the United States for a total of at least 30 months, okay? During that 5 year. Now keep in mind for those of you who are married to an American citizen, it's 18 months out of those 3 years. Okay, so 30 months for the 5 years and 18 months for the 3 years. And then finally, this is also very important, so everyone please pay attention, that when you apply for citizenship, you must be physically present. You must be in the United States physically for at least 3 months before you file for citizenship. Okay, so before you file for that citizenship, you need to be at least 3 months before you file. Okay? All right, so guys, do I have any questions before we continue? So once again, continuous residence and physical presence. Those are the things we have to think about when it comes to Part 9 on the application. And we're going to look at Part 9 in just a moment. Okay, so everyone feel okay? Because the physical presence and continuous residence can often be confusing, I thought we would play just a little game here, and the name of the game is, Are You Eligible? Everyone, let's say that word together, eligible.
Eligible.
Now, do we remember what eligible means?
If you are allowed to be.
Yeah, allowed to do it. Are you able,
yeah.
are you allowed, if you have permission, right, to do it? So again, in the questions we're going to be looking at, we're going to be thinking about, are the people we see in this situation eligible? Which means that can they apply for citizenship based on their situation? Okay. Now, all of these situations will involve the issues about traveling outside of the United States. Now remember, you must be physically present in the United States for a total of 30 months out of 5 years or 18 months out of 3 years. And you must be physically present in the United States for 3 months before you can file. All right, and then of course, the continuous residence issue about 5 years and 3 years. Okay, so we're going to play a little game. We're going to see 3 people. All right, so ready? We're going to play. All right. Okay, now what I'd like to do is ask, so let's see, Elaine, I'm going to let you do situation number 1 for us. So this is Louise. So Elaine, can you read the information there on the screen for us?
Hi, my name is Luis. I am from
Venezuela.
Venezuela. I have been a permanent
resident
in the United States for 4 years and a half. I have traveled to my home country each year for 1 month on each trip. Am I forget how to say that.
Eligible?
eligible to apply for citizenship. Eligible.
Okay. So guys, again, let's take a look and see, do we think Luis is eligible to apply for citizenship? So yes or no? What do you
Yes.
think?
Yes.
Okay. Saba says yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Elaine says yes. Anybody else?
Yes.
Okay, Belisario says yes. All right. Anybody else want to guess before we see the answer? Elena, what do you think?
Yes, I think yes.
Okay, so we have lots of yeses here. Okay, ready? Here comes the answer. No!
Why?
Why not? Well, look very carefully at what he said. He said, I have been a permanent resident for how long?
Oh, 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
4
Mr.
years.
John. Oh, we
Yes,
forgot. Yeah, so yes, of course, his travel situation, his physical presence is okay. But remember, he has to have continuous residence for
half year.
5 years. So right now, he only has 4 years and 6 months. So he's not ready yet to apply. Okay? Tricky. Okay? All right. It is tricky, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, but his travel situation was good. He was only gone for 1 month each year, so that's good. He has plenty of time. Okay, here comes the next person. All right, Saba, would you like to read Ayako's situation?
Okay. Hello, my name is Ayako. I come from Japan. I'm married to an American citizen. We have been married for 3 years. Last year, I took a trip to Japan to visit my sick mother and stayed for 3 months. 2 years ago, my father died, and I went to a funeral. I was gone for 5 months. Am I eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship?
Okay, guys, so that's our question. Is Ayako eligible to apply? Yes or no?
No.
No.
No. Why not?
Yes, yes, Mr. John.
Why?
That's
Because he's married with American citizen and he have married for 3 years
Uh-huh.
and he just spent 5 months. The rule is 6 months.
Aha. All right, so congratulations, Gisela. You did get it correct. Now remember, for people who are married for 3 years, they can be outside of the United States, right, for a total of 12 months. So right now, she has only been outside of the United States for a total of 8 months. So she is okay to apply for citizenship. She has 3 years, and she has continuous residence. She hasn't changed her address. And like Gisela said, she was only gone for a maximum of 1 trip of 5 months. So in this case, she is eligible to apply for citizenship. Okay? All right, we've got one more. All right, Elena, would you like to read Sarah's little story here?
I didn't see first sentence. Yes, yes.
Okay. Can you see it?
No.
Let me see if I can make it a little smaller. Hold on.
Oh, yes, I see.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm from the Congo. I have had my green card for 5 years, and I want to apply for citizenship. I have gone back to my country each year for 3 months each time, except for this year. I had to visit my sick mother, and I was there for almost 8 months. Am I eligible to apply for citizenship?
Okay, thank you, Elena. So that's our question group. Is Sarah eligible to apply?
Nope,
No,
because
No.
no.
Okay, well, let's see. So far, she has, for continuous residence, she has 5 years, at least so far. Okay, she's traveled each year for 3 months, so that's 9 months, right? Each year, or 12 months rather. Okay, and then this last year she was gone for 8 months, so that would be 20 months outside of the United States. But the question is she eligible? Okay, now everyone, I hear no, but
No.
the question though is that 8 months. So we're going to say she probably can, but, okay? So let's see what the explanation is. So again, Sarah has been out of the country a total of 20 months. So that's 3 months for each of the last 4 years, right? So that's 12 months and 8 months for this last year. So that does mean that she's been physically present for a total of 40 months. Remember, it's 60 months or 2 years and 6 months, or as Elaine mentioned, the days, which is more than the 30 that's necessary. So that part's okay. That part is okay. But the question is that last trip. Her last trip was more than 6 months. Now, remember what I said. I said that you may have to apply again. But that does not mean necessarily, that does not mean that it's going to be 100% true for everyone. If you noticed, she's probably okay to apply, but if she changed her residence back to her home country, then probably not, at least not at the moment. Okay, now Elaine mentioned traveling outside of the United States. If you're going to be gone for more than 6 months, that can be a problem. So maybe Sarah needs to apply for re-entry into the United States. So she's probably okay, but she probably needs to apply for re-entry. But again, she has to be she can't be gone for a year. Remember, we said that's the thing about physical presence. So the question will be, did she actually change her residence back to her country, or does she still have her permanent resident status? So again, guys, I cannot answer every question for every student. Her situation might be different. So all I can tell you is just think about the numbers we talked about today. 5 years, right? 5 years. Don't be gone more than 6 months, because that could be a problem. If you're gone for a year at a time for one trip, that's definitely a problem. And remember, don't change our residence back to our countries. Try to stay a resident of the United States continuously, right? Continuously during that time.
Yeah.
It can be confusing. Now, I think most students don't have any problems. Most students maybe go back to their country for, a few weeks and then come back to the United States. But again, just remember, each person's situation might be different. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, so in this case, Sarah, maybe yes, maybe no. She's probably okay, but again, she's probably going to have to apply for re-entry. So that's what we would suggest. If she changed her residence, she would probably lose her permanent resident status. She would need to apply for a re-entry permit to the United States. So Saba, the friend you mentioned, like for example, being out of the country for COVID, this is probably what the person's going to have to do.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
sure.
Yeah. So guys, just remember, I don't know everything. So in this case, I'm just giving you 3 situations where it could be different depending on the person. Okay, so once again, to apply for citizenship, let's just review this before we go to the application. You must be a permanent resident for 5 years, 3 years if you're married to a spouse, and have continuous residence, which means your address is in the United States, and not reside outside of the United States for more than 6 months, or as Elaine mentioned, 180 days. And then you also have to have a physical presence. That means your body has to be in this country for a total of 30 months and not be outside of the United States for more than 1 year at any time. So 6 months, 8 months, you're probably okay, probably, but again, that might be difficult. You may have to reapply, apply for reentry. And then finally, remember, you must be at your current residence for 3 months inside of the United States before you can apply. Okay? All right. Well, guys, again, you can go back and review the video. I would recommend it if you have any questions, but most of the time, my students don't have any problems with these particular ideas. Okay, well, guys, let's go ahead and go to the application. Now, once again, parts 9, 10, and 11 are probably among the most important on the application, and so that's why I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the idea of residence and presence. So let's go ahead and look at part 9. So part 9 is referring to your time outside of the United States. Now, remember, most of the questions in the application are talking about, let me get a different color here, sorry guys, is to talk about the last 5 years, okay? The last 5 years. And notice it says a day, how many total days? So each day, of course, is 24 hours that you spent outside of the United States. So let's zoom into those questions for just a moment, okay? So once again, look at question number 1. It says, how many total days, 24 hours or longer, did you spend outside of the United States during the last 5 years? Now, some students say, Mr. John, I don't remember. Well, you need to write down every trip. Again, on your passport, you might be able to contact the passport agency that issued you the passport to see how often you've traveled. I will tell you that when they're doing the interview, the person interviewing you knows all of this information. They know it. They're asking you to make sure that you are the person that's being interviewed, right? So not somebody else, but that you are the person you are. So in this case, for these two questions, how many total days and how many trips? And again, trips of 24 hours or longer. So again, that they mean a day, but how many trips have you taken outside of the United States in the last 5 years? Okay. Now, I realize that some of you right now have not lived in the United States for 5 years, but the idea is you need to really make sure you remember, because if you look at the box here, it says list below all the trips of 24 hours or longer. And if you need more paper, you may have to get extra sheets of paper. I've had a couple of students, for example, who live in a different country who travel 2 times a year, 3 times a year back to their country. That's a lot of trips. If you think about 5 years and you travel 2 times, 3 times, that's 10 trips, 12 trips, 15 trips. That can be a lot. Now, it also says start with your most recent trip, so the trip you did most recently, the soonest, right? And then work backwards. So did you take any trips in 2020? My guess is because of COVID, nobody has traveled outside of the United States. But again, notice the questions. It says the date you left the United States. Okay, so let's highlight this as we go. So dates you left the United States, the date you returned, and again, look at that question. Did the trip last 6 months or more? Okay. Now you see, Elaine, do you see the problem here? The application says 6 months. Yeah. So again, some months are longer. So again, they don't tell us this information on the applications. But again, did any of those trips last 6 months or more? And what were the countries you traveled to? And again, those total days outside of the United States. Okay. Now, does everybody remember every trip they've taken in the last 5 years? Do you remember?
For me, yes.
Well, for some of us, it might be easy. Maybe the answer is 0. I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, 0.
Yeah. But honestly, let me say to the group, it's very, very important to remember each day, each thing, because I know one guy, he was confused and he didn't remember exactly the number he got outside of America, and he failed his to get his citizenship.
Yes, and so that's why,
Yeah,
Saba, it's so important to
yeah,
contact, yeah, the
yes.
passport agency to find out your exact trips.
It's very, very important. Yes.
Yes. And again, Saba, I think that's a good lesson for all of the application. Again, they already know most of this information. Everything on the application, they already know. They
Yeah.
want to see if you're telling the truth. They want to see if you are the person that you say you are. So, Saba,
Yeah.
that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
And let me say that he was very, very good in everything. The answers, they were good, everything. But
Mhm.
they take it like when he was confused, they take it like he didn't tell them the truth. So
Now, did this person get to apply again or not?
yeah. No,
Okay.
he got his
Okay.
citizenship. I think 3 months ago. Yes,
Okay. Well, that's good
but
to hear.
after a
Okay.
long time.
Yeah.
After a long time.
Yeah, because sometimes they might, if they think you're not telling the truth, they may stop the interview. Yeah, so
Yes.
that
Yes.
can happen. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's good to know when thinking about practice. So Saba made the very good point. You must have the exact dates. Okay. Now, if you're not 100% sure, if you can't, if you're having difficulty finding that information, some students get a lawyer, an attorney, to help them fill out the application, and sometimes they can do some of that work. But again, that costs money. So that's why it's so important, like Saba said, to write it down. Okay, so that is part 9. And again, thinking about continuous residence and physical presence. This particular question is talking about physical presence. How many times have you been outside of the country? And again, were you physically present during these times? Because remember, it says 6 months or more. It still has to add to that total. But if you were gone more than a year, that could be a problem. Okay, now let's go ahead and move on. Now, I want to be clear, guys. I'm not going to ask you necessarily any of these specific questions, but the part 10, of course, is where things get a little more personal, and that is talking about our marital history. So again, I am not going to ask any particular questions, just in terms of just practicing. We'll practice a couple of questions. But if you notice, they are going to ask you all the questions about your past. And notice, this particular question is not about the last 5 years. This is about your life. So keep that in mind. This is one of those questions where they're asking you about your life, not just 5 years. So that's why I want to remind everybody that some parts of the application are your whole personal history. Okay, so this particular part here is referring to your marital status. Now, I'm going to zoom in here for just a moment. Let's look at the categories in question number 1. So first off, again, you don't have to tell me, but again, everyone, let's turn on our microphones for just a moment. I want to practice these words together because again, they might ask you these in the interview. Okay, so everyone, let's say these words together. I'm going to use my pointer here, so let's say it. Single.
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 Married.
Married.
Divorced.
Divorced.
Widowed.
Widowed.
Separated.
Okay, now the last one is 2 words, so let's say it together. Marriage annulled.
Marriage
Annulled.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Now, again, you don't have to tell me your status, but let's go through quickly. I think most of us know what single means. I think most of us know married. Most of us know divorced. Okay. But widowed might be new to us. So again, widowed means that your spouse has died. So right now, you're not married to anyone else. Your current status is that your spouse died. Okay. Separated means you and your spouse are not living together, but you are not divorced. So maybe you were married still, but you are not living together. Okay. And then the last one, annulled, if you look over here on the right, annulment is a specific situation in the Catholic Church. So if I have any Catholics here in the class, it's hard to describe if you're not Catholic. So the best way I could think about it is it's not divorce, it's kind of like erased. So you were married and then you went to the Catholic Church and said, we can't be married anymore. So instead what they do is annul the marriage, which means basically sort of erased that you were ever married. So again, it's a little difficult, but this is something specific to the Catholic Church. Okay? So again, that is referring to, and everyone, let's say this word together. Everyone say this with me. Marital status. Everyone.
Marital status.
So for example, if the interviewer says, what is your marital status? Then you would answer single, married, divorced, that would be the question. Now, the word status, okay, that word status has many different meanings. Okay, so when they ask about status in the interview, they're probably asking about if you are married or not. But the word status has many other meanings too. Okay, so you might hear the word status in different places. But for the interview, status means married, single, and so on. Okay, now, if anybody in the group, right here, it says, if you are single and you have never married, you can go ahead to part 11. So I'm not going to ask anybody, but if that is you, then you don't have to fill out any of this information. So you're probably thinking, this is a good idea for not being married. No, I'm just kidding. Of course not. But the idea is if you're not married, you don't have to do this part of the application. Now, let's continue just to look at the other questions. So it says, if you are married, is your spouse a current member of the U.S. Armed Forces? Can anyone help us remember, what does that mean, U.S. Armed Forces?
Army.
Army and
Yeah.
Navy.
Yeah, so the military.
Yes, military.
Yes. Okay. Now, in my experience so far, I think in my 20 years of teaching, I have had one student who fit this particular situation. So it's not pretty common, especially here in northern Kentucky. But again, if you have a spouse who's in the armed forces, that's something you will have to indicate in this particular box here. So it says yes or no. Okay. So again, you'll mark no if not, and then if you mark yes, you'll continue the application. But the idea is they want to know yes or no. Okay, now once again, guys, I'm not going to ask you this question, but if you notice, here's another example of the present perfect. How many times have you been married? How many times have you been married? Now notice what it says. It means it includes annulled marriages, marriages to other people, and even if you've married the same person more than one time. So again, that's a question you'll have to answer here in the box. So if you've been married one time, you'll put a 1. 2 times, 3 times. So the idea is you do have to answer that question. Again, everything about your life is on this application. Now, again, I am not going to go through every box in this next part, but if you are currently married now, then you have to give the information about your current spouse. Now again, spouse, if you remember, spouse is husband or wife, okay? So again, you will fill out the information just like we did at the beginning of the application. Your family name, your given name, that person's given name. Did your spouse have a previous legal name? Now, of course, this is common if your spouse, like if you were a man and your spouse is a woman, then your wife, for example, may have changed their names. And then if you remember, just like we talked about before, does your current spouse have any other names, maybe on other credit cards or other things they like to use? So, for example, if you remember, my name is Jonathan. That's my full name, but I don't like that. I never use that. My mother uses it when I'm in trouble. She'll say, Jonathan, right? So, but John is my name. Yeah, so I prefer John. So you will probably notice if I were filling out this information, so for example, if I were the spouse, for example, we would put Jonathan here, but then my nickname would be John. So that would be the name that you would see there. Okay, so again, same thing, just like you did before. And then your spouse's date of birth. I hope you remember your spouse's birthday. Yes. Of course. We don't
Yes.
no don't do this. Yes. Everybody, yes, okay. And even more importantly, do you know letter E? The date you entered into the marriage, right? This is your anniversary. Do we remember this date? If you're married? Of
Yes.
course. Yes, Mr. John. If you forget it, you're in trouble. Okay.
Men maybe will forget.
Listen,
Woman
yes,
never forget.
but Elaine, on this application, we do not forget. But I agree, Elaine. Sometimes we're terrible with that. Okay, that's good. All right, but I'm sure you guys never forget, right? Nobody forgets, right? Okay. Okay. So again, that's the basic idea here, and I do want to mention as you go through part 10 very quickly. Number 7 is definitely important for us. So let's highlight number 7. If your spouse is not a U.S. citizen, so currently if you're married and your spouse is not a citizen, then you will have to fill out that information just like you did when you were filing as a permanent resident. You have to give their permanent resident status, if they have an A number. So again, if your spouse has all of this information, you need to put that here. Okay, so if your spouse is not a U.S. citizen, you need to complete the following information. Now, if you're married to an American, of course, you do not fill out part 7. But part 8 says, again, there's that present perfect. It says, how many times has your current spouse been married? So thinking about your wife or your husband, how many times have they been married? Now, I'm going to tell you a very, very small story. Are you ready? This is a true story. I actually had a student who did not know that their husband or wife, I won't tell you who, had been married before. And when they were filling out the application, their husband or wife finally had to tell them that they had been married before. Yeah, so guys, this is not the time to be surprised when you thought, but this is a true story. I had a student who discovered that their spouse had been married before. Okay.
It's time to tell the truth.
Yeah, so this is if you're not going to, your spouse has to tell the truth here. Okay. Now again, I'm not going to go through everything, but this is where your spouse would also have to put information about their previous marriages. So were they married before? Here's a word we're going to learn real quickly. Let's say this word, prior. Everyone, let's say prior.
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 So prior means before. Before. So if I ask you prior marriage, prior spouse, that means the person they were married to before. So again, if they've been married before, they have to list that information on here too. So I told you, this is a very personal document, and sometimes we get surprises. And I like this. If your current spouse has had more than one previous marriage, they're going to need extra paper to fill out this information. So if you discover your spouse has been married 8 times or 9 times, they're going to need lots of paper to fill out this information. Okay? Finally, again, if your spouse is not a U.S. citizen, they will have to give their country of citizenship and nationality. Okay, so again, this is very much what we did at the beginning of the application. Okay, guys, do I have any questions about the marriage history, the marital history part of the interview? Okay, well, like I said, Saba is correct. It's time to get honest. So again, if you notice, that information is there. Now, finally, for this last part here, now it's time for you to tell the truth. And that is, how many times were you married before? So if you were married before, provide the information about your prior spouse. So again, if you had been married before, you have to list that information here too. Okay. Now, sometimes I have students who have, maybe they have different types of arrangements. I've had students from countries in Africa, for example, who might have, like kind of a wife in one country and an American wife. But the problem, of course, is they can really only be married legally to one. So this can be a problem sometimes. It can be. But the idea is you have to also tell the truth. Okay, so again, I'm not going to ask you any questions here, but remember, if you have any prior spouses, you have to put this information on the form too. And then notice at the bottom of the form here, letter H, how did the marriage with your prior spouse end? So annulled, divorced, did your spouse die, deceased? That's what deceased means, and so on.
Yeah.
Okay.
That means.
Say it again, Elaine.
I mean that means it's die.
Yes, deceased means dead. Yes.
Dead. Okay.
Okay, and again, same thing for you. If you have been married more than one time or so, you'll need extra paper to fill out that information. Okay, guys, our time's getting short, so we're ready to move on to the next section, and that is about children. Okay, so again, I told you 9, 10, and 11 are some of the most important parts of the test. 9 is about their trips for the last 5 years, but 10 and 11 are about your life. So again, in part 11, if we have children. Now, I don't know if anyone in the group has children, but I just want to mention that, of course, if you have no children whatsoever, then, of course, if you put 0 here, you're finished with this particular part of the application. If you do have children, I do want to mention, the question, though, is what do they mean by children? And so let's take a look, because this can be a little, it can be a little confusing. So it says you must indicate all children. So for example, children who are alive, children who may be missing, even children who have died. Okay. Now again, that's very personal. I understand. That's a very personal thing if you've had children who've died. Of course, children born in the United States or children born in other countries. Children under 18 years of age or older. So again, any child. Children who are currently married or not married. Now this next one happens a lot with my students. Children living with you or living somewhere else. Again, I've had some students where they have maybe children with their second husband here in the United States or second wife, and they might have other children in another country, in their home country. Okay. Notice the next one, stepchildren. What's a stepchild? Can somebody tell me what a stepchild is?
Stepchild is, for example, is your spouse before marry and they have a kid, so that is a step.
Yeah. So for example, I had a stepfather and I have 2 stepmothers, or 1 stepmother rather, and if they have children from another marriage, so that would also be step. So like my stepbrother, for example. So in this case, yes, if you have kids with that you did not actually biologically have with your spouse, yes, okay. If you adopted any children legally, and any children who were born when you were, even if you were not married. So again, when they say all children, they mean alive or not alive, living with you or not living with you. Any children you have, you must put on this document. Okay, even if they're 50 years old, you have to put them on this document. Now, if you notice when they say listing their children, it says here, provide the following information, your sons or daughters, regardless of age. So again, doesn't matter. You can start, for example, with the oldest child, if you like, for child number 1. And again, all of their information, do they have permanent resident status, or again, where were they born, which country? If you look on the next page, where are they living, the current address, are they here with you or in another country? If they're living in a different province or region, again, if they're in different foreign countries or addresses, you have to put them down. And then notice in the final question, it says, what's their relationship to you? Biological. So biological means, did you actually give birth, if you're a woman, or if you're a man, if this is from your marriage? Are they stepchildren? Are they legally adopted? So again, you would put that information in the box. Okay? Now, basically, you just repeat that for every child. So if you have lots of children, you'll need lots of paper. If you don't have any children, then this part will be pretty easy. You'll put nothing. But the idea is every child that we have. Okay? All right, so guys, any questions about part 11? No questions?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, good. So again, I understand it's easier if we're not married and we don't have kids. That makes the process much easier. But just remember, this is about your whole life. Your whole life. These two questions. Okay. All right. Well, guys, let's return to the presentation now. So again, I think we covered a lot of good information. Oops, sorry. I'm sorry, guys. We were going to review a couple of vocabulary words and some questions. Okay. So what I would like to do this time is just have you guys practice the questions for just a moment. So Belisario, would you like to read question number 1 for us?
What is your correct material question?
Okay, let's try it again. Marital
Marital
status.
status.
Okay, so again, so guys, what would be the answer to that question? You don't have to tell me your answer, but what would be an answer to this question?
Single, divorced,
Single, divorced.
widow,
Yeah. Nobody mentioned married here. What's going
Married.
on? Okay,
Married,
okay.
yeah. Married and old.
Okay, good, good. Okay. Gisela, would you read number 2 for us? Are you there, Gisela?
Yeah, I'm here. Number 2, how many times have you traveled outside of the United States in the last 5 years?
Okay, thank you, Gisela. So what could be some answers to this question?
One time.
1 time, 3 times,
Times.
5
3
times. Yeah,
5
okay, good,
times, yeah.
good. All right. Let's see. Saba, would you read question number 3?
Do you have any children?
Okay, now guys, what could be some answers to this question?
Yes.
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 All right, well, we need to give a number too, right?
Uh,
2,
2,
3,
3.
1. Okay. Or no, I don't.
Mhm.
All right, that could be an answer. All right. Saba, would you like to read the last one for us?
Okay. Has your spouse been married before?
Uh-oh. How should we answer this question?
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth. Yeah. Yes, no. Do not say, I don't know. Do not say this in the interview. If you say, I don't know, bye-bye. They'll send you
Yeah.
out of the interview, okay? You
Yes.
need that in the application. All right, now finally, guys, we had some words that we talked about. So, guys, let's say these words together one more time. Status.
Status.
So remember, in the application, when they say status, they're talking about your marital status. So married, single, or so on. Okay, let's say the next word, spouse.
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 So remember, spouse is husband or
Husband and or wife.
okay. And then finally, let's say this last word together, prior.
Prior.
prior,
Prior means
Before.
before. So
before,
you probably know the word previous. Maybe you've heard the word previous, prior. These words are pretty much the same. Okay. Okay, now guys, once again, we will send you another video of a practice interview that you can practice at home. And again, to prepare us for the discussion on December 10th, we will send you the updated citizenship questions. So my advice to everyone right now is when I send these to you, please just take a look at them. Okay, now I think you will notice most of the questions are the same. Okay, so don't, I know some of you are like, I'm sweating, but most of the questions are the same. There are some changes, so that's what we will discuss on December 10th. Okay, but I will send you those questions in your email so that you can start looking at them. But remember, we do not know what's going to happen once the next administration, once the next president takes office, whether they're going to keep the changes or not. So keep in mind, we don't know the answer to that question. All right. Okay, now guys, I want to remind everybody, speaking of American holidays, right? We have to remember American holidays. Next week is Thanksgiving, so we do not have class next Thursday. So I do want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.